Happy Monday, everybody, and welcome into the Gramlich and McLean podcast, presented by Ingles, the official supermarket of Gramlich and McLean. Mac, I cannot believe it. This is our final summer guest episode. Then we get into our season previews, which means football season will be here, but it feels like we just started these. My mind is blown.
We sprint through them. That's what's
I
crazy.
know.
And what's even crazier is, you do all this stuff kind of at once, but yet you're still doing things and you have other things going on. And then it's like, wait, this is the last guest? What are you talking about? Summer's over?
Yeah.
Summer is just beginning for a lot of people, or cranking up right now just for a lot of people. But for our guests, it's coming to a close. And KG, we wanted to go out with a bang. We've got our buddy Josh Pate, who is unbelievable, a superstar kind of in this space. And his story is so much fun. I mean, wait till you guys hear all the different things, his thoughts, how he got to where he did, the confidence. He's a big believer too, which we love, and just kind of the way that he did it. So this was a lot of fun. I was looking forward to it for a long time, and glad we were able to get him on the show.
He delivered. Sometimes you get a big guest and you're like, oh, how's it going to be? But Josh delivered. His story is crazy. He has like a specific moment when he realized that YouTube and going live and getting stuff on the internet was going to be a thing. And then he acted on it like the next day. He had a light bulb moment, if you will. And then his stories from going down to Miami and talking with Mario Cristobal, he did, like a show down there.
Yeah.
Also had some Cuban coffee, of course, which just wait till our coffee conversation with Mario Cristobal because I mess up so bad. So just wait for that. But he goes down to Miami and he went to Virginia Tech and talked with Brent Price. So he had some really good stories from both of those visits, Mac.
Yeah. And again, just who he is, how he does stuff. Because it's one thing to, see us or see somebody else and these great people on their show and doing their thing. But when you can kind of peel back the curtain a little bit and just, who are you as a person? And I really enjoyed that. And like you said, we get these guests all the time, and this was one of the best. And I hope you guys enjoyed as much as we did. Josh, thank you for your time, brother. It was so much fun. So without further ado, quick message from our friends over at Ingles, and let's get to Josh Pate.
It's time to discover the convenience and time savings of contact-free pickup with Ingles Curbside. Just visit shop.ingles-markets.com or download the app. And your Ingles personal shopper gets to work with specialized training on how to select the freshest items for a pre-scheduled pickup. They'll even text you with updates. You pull up to a designated space and your personal shopper delivers your items right to your vehicle. Fresh, fast, and affordable. It's all in the bag. Ingles. Low prices. Love the savings.
Josh Pate, my brother, man, it's great to see you. I have been looking forward to this for a long time, man, and excited to get you on the show. And it was funny when we were, doing our research and we're getting the story and all these different things ready for talking with you here. I just am so blown away by how you got to this point. And I stumbled upon your tweet that you have pinned to your profile there, talking about the struggles and talking about how there was a time you had no clue what this was going to look like moving forward. Now to a point, you had 250,000 subs on YouTube and you're going across the country talking to these coaches. How the heck did this happen is the best way I want to start this show.
Being blessed is how it happened. But I won't say embarrassed. This is definitely not the word, because I really appreciate opportunity and I want folks to hear that story because I think it can help other people. But sometimes I almost feel like a little secret embarrassment when people talk about like the struggle in relation to me and this and that, because I'm not saying I had it easy, but like I always look at my situation relative to other situations.
That's right.
And like I see real struggle, not just in our country, but like across the world. And I think to myself, dude, at my worst day was still better than some folks' best days. So I always view it through that prism. But within that prism, like within our world here, I really think that had I existed in like the 80s or 90s and my upbringing had been what it was, which was I didn't grow up poor. I didn't grow up rich, probably closer to the former than the latter than the former. I didn't really have like a purpose. I didn't know what I wanted to do when I got out of high school. When I went into college, I wasted probably a couple of years and then left college and went and worked like construction and all this sort of stuff because I had no clue what I wanted to do. If you would have asked me, hey, who are you? at age 18, 19, 20. I would have given you the information on my birth certificate or my driver's license, but I had no clue like who I was and what I wanted to do. Like, where did my passion and talent intersect? I had no idea. So I ended up figuring that out. Like, I always played sports. I loved sports. I loved listening to it. I was fascinated with the production side of it. But how do you get into that world? And I'm asking myself that in like 2008, nine. I don't know. I don't have a degree from Northwestern or Syracuse, where it seems every other one of these folks have. And I don't have family in the business. So my point is, had that been the case in 1993, I don't know that I ever find a way in. But in the mid 20 teens, when, this like a cell phone, when all of a sudden that becomes your overhead and your distribution, because Facebook and YouTube and whatnot allow live streaming on their platforms, it's like Berlin Walls falling down all
Yeah.
around you. And all of a sudden you've got an opportunity, and you've still got to make it for yourself, but at least you've got the opportunity. So that's that entire story is a long story, but I really look at seminal moments that are out of my control, and that's really one or two of the big ones of just right place and then right time, thankfully finding you.
Yeah, I mean that's so interesting, and I think that's a lot of people's stories that are in our business right now. Kind of, if you have that go-getter mentality, you have some of the tools that you can use, and then if people like listening to you, the sky's the limit. Josh, you mentioned when you were younger, you didn't know who you were and you didn't know what you wanted to do. I think that's so good of you to say, because I think we have this idea that we're all supposed to be born knowing exactly what we want to do, and that's just not reality. But we also know, and we've seen from your social media and all that, that you're also a man of faith. Can you tell me how God and how your faith helped you get to where you are and helped you through those times where you really didn't know what you wanted to do?
Yeah, I'll tell you, a lot of people think a lot of different things when you say church. When you say
Mm,
church, some people think of a building on the corner. Some people think of a classification of people, if you will. Well, I was brought up in the church, so to me, the church is people. That's what it is,
yeah.
and you have your congregation, but it is a people. It's what it's supposed to be. And I can tell you, just from a personal standpoint, from a faith-based standpoint, I always knew the right things. I could recite the Bible verses. Like, I knew doctrine, if you want to call it that. I knew what I was supposed to believe and what I was supposed to think. And so tough times come your way. You know that you're supposed to keep yourself a certain level of even keeled, because you know whose hands ultimately it's in. But when the tough times come, like, can you
Right.
actually practice that? Can you practice that mentality? But I'll tell you where I learned about, um, where I learned about the rubber meeting the road, so to speak, in that aspect, is when I didn't have much going for me. And, when I didn't know much about much, it was people, in our like home congregation down in Columbus, Georgia, for example. I can look back now and realize those folks believed in me way more than I believed in myself at the time. And those folks who had seen me from the time I couldn't walk all the way up until that moment, those folks were going out of their way to, provide help or provide advice or provide resource. And some of it I didn't even know they were providing. And others, I could see it in my face, even though I may not have appreciated it at the time as much as I certainly do now. But that was foundational
Mm.
in, wiring me the right way mentally. And now, all these years later, I actually find myself on the other end of consultations sometimes. And, I always ask that. I always ask, who are you and what do you believe? Those are the two questions I ask. The first one is paramount to realizing what you're ultimately capable of. And the second is, I want to find out, like, what kind of wind is in your sail,
Yeah.
because that is really, really important for me to be able to give any kind of advice to anyone.
Hmm. Hmm. Wow. That's amazing. And I think what's fascinating about kind of, the different things that you said there, and, finding your purpose and identifying, and, I think the perspective of the struggle of, hey, if we all put our problems on the table, I'm reaching for mine back quick, right? Like, I'm gonna keep mine. When you see it to others, I think it just shines so bright in you, man. And, we don't have to be sitting here, thumping a Bible to people every single day, but the way that you live, and I think the way that you carry yourself, the way that you do things is so important. And I thank you for that. And it's really fun to watch. It's really fun to see. diving into more of your journey and how you got to this point, because it was a bit unconventional, right? You mentioned live and YouTube and all these different things. That wasn't quite the way. I mean, it was, I got to get to a big network, I got to get on TV, I got to do local, jump up, whatever it is. How did this all come about, man, to where you have built this massive machine and are able to have the success and the audience that you do?
Really new. So that concept's really new. And if you're like probably any of the three of us, you came up in a time where you were immersed in legacy media.
Right.
So if I'm listening to an audio product, it is ESPN radio. It's nationally distributed. And if I'm watching something visually, it is CBS, it's Fox, it's ESPN, but it's on a television in a room. So that's what I came up in. So that's what I thought the way was. And I mentioned overhead and distribution really intentionally because those were huge barriers. Like that's what the big boys had lock and key on is overhead. If you were ever going to say something in Columbus, Georgia, and have people in LA and New York and Seattle and Miami hear it, you had to have probably really fancy production, multi-million-dollar studio. You had to have distribution though. That's the name of the game. It still is today. The game's just changed. And so when that stuff started to evolve, and when Facebook became the giant it became, and when YouTube became the giant it became, that still wasn't that big a deal. It's when they added the live streaming mechanism that everything changed. And I will never forget this because I was working in local news down in Columbus. And one night after like our 6 o'clock newscast, I go in our weather center because the chief meteorologist there was still one of my best friends, actually. And he's watching some stream, like he's watching a forecast from someone in Houston or something like that. And I thought he was just watching a video. And he said, no, this is live right now. And I said, well, how's that working? And he said, well, it's actually, he had the full window pulled up. So he minimized the window and it was on YouTube. And I did not know that they had just introduced live streaming to their platform. And so it was like one of the very few light bulb moments in my life. I'm not a cartoon. That doesn't happen all the time for me, but the light bulb moment happened. And so like the very next day, I started doing those just on like my own profiles. I started talking college football in a way that I would like to talk about it. Now, I was
literally out of nowhere. You just said, I'm doing this.
Yeah, because I knew like this right here is going, I knew it was going to blow up. There's no way it wasn't going to.
Wow.
And so I started doing that the next day. I was already at that TV station doing a weeknight sort of local or regionalized college football show, but it was just Alabama, Auburn, Georgia. And it was 10 o'clock at night. It was on the CW.
Not bad, right? Not a bad product.
But I always wanted to do a nationally reaching show. And so I started doing what I would do in the flavor I would do it. And I just started doing it on like Facebook and YouTube. And they shut it down because they said, hey, we're not paying you to do that on your accounts on our dime, which was fair. It was fair. So I let my contract run out, waited a year, and come time to renegotiate. And I said, well, if I can't do that, like I'm out. And they called my bluff on it, but I wasn't bluffing. So we come down to the literal last day of my contract. And the news director and general manager have me in their office. And they said, we really thought you were BSing us. Like, what are you going to do? Are you really just going to leave? They thought I had another job somewhere. And I didn't. My plan was to start a YouTube channel. That was my plan. And at the time, the concept of monetizing YouTube was foreign. No one's doing that. That's just something hobbyists do for fun on the side. And so I said, well, it's going to change. Like there was no doubt in my mind it was going to change. I didn't even need proof of performance. I knew it was coming. So we came to an agreement and I offered them to work remaining as their news anchor in the mornings, which I was doing at the time. I said, I'll 1099, like I'll independent contract with you. That gets me away from the employment legalese. Give me the studio 3 nights a week. We don't broadcast anything between 6:30 and 10:30 anyway. Give me an hour of studio time 3 nights a week. Let me produce my own show on my own channels. And they thought they had pulled one over on me. They almost laughed. They said, well, absolutely. Like we're gaining on this deal. And so I started my YouTube channel, started doing the show, same thing I call it now. And we started doing a national college football show. And that LSU 2019 season comes along. And I just so happened, a lightning in a bottle, predicted them to win it in the summer. And Joe Burrow becomes what he becomes. Well, our numbers started to
Wow.
scale a little bit. And it wasn't too long after that CBS noticed, and I got a call from them after that season, and they said, we don't even do anything like you're doing. Like
Mm,
we don't have any digital presence like that. Do you want to come do what you do for us? And that's the big call. That's the one you've waited a long time on. But I came here right before COVID actually started. Came here in January of 2020. We started the show in March of 2020 on the CBS kind of platform. And then when COVID set in, a lot of people got away from talking about sports for a little while,
right.
as you guys well remember. And so we didn't. We didn't act like it wasn't happening, but we didn't let it seep into the content. We were just hopeful a season was going to happen. What we found was that was such a huge piece of scaling our presence early because people were flocking to anyone who would just stick to talking about sports.
Right.
And then the season got there and it was off to the races. And now, I think it was as of last fall, early last fall, this show became the most consumed college football show in digital media every month, and hasn't let up since then. So we got a really loyal audience, but it's also a blueprint that I think was executable a long time ago.
Mm.
Like I said, I just think the climate technologically had to change to allow it to happen.
And to your point, Josh, first of all, I mean, the fact that you were so ahead of the game is awesome. But
Yeah.
to get to make it come full circle, to get that legacy media, quote unquote, group to say, hey, we want to invest in this, which it took them a while, right? It took them a while to understand the power of digital. And of course, here we are. It's probably the biggest thing out there right now. You mentioned so many different schools that you were covering, specifically more SEC. But I want to take a broad picture because you cover everybody. And that's what I really like about you, because I think Mac and I try to be, that we're talking ACC and there's so many SEC heavy shows, which I get, it's the SEC, I understand. But where do you see right now in this ever changing college football landscape where now you have a school like Stanford in the ACC and you have a school like Southern Cal in the Big Ten? Where do you see the ACC heading into this season? Or I know I understand the Power 2 discussion, but you also have 12 playoff spots now, so that opens up a lot more. Where does the ACC stand in your opinion?
Yeah, so I think the Power 2 discussion is completely warranted. Like it would be, you'd have to be oblivious to the changing landscape to say,
Right.
well, that's not really a thing. Well, of course it's a thing. But if I were, let's just say Florida State, or if I were Clemson or Miami or Louisville or whoever, I would look and I would say, number one, we see a new headline and a new rumor every day about the future of our conference, which we don't really control.
Right.
So even if we don't like our current plight, even if we don't like the Power 2 concept, who knows what it's going to look like 24, 36, 48 months down the road. But in the meantime, it's not a 4-team field anymore. It's a 12-team field, like you said. So if I'm Mike Norvell, I probably will have a problem until the end of time with how last year went down. But last year will never happen again because a 12-team field would never allow it to happen again.
Right.
So I would look and I would say, well, as long as I've got the assurance that if I take care of business on my end, there's going to be a spot for me. And as long as I know we're invested to the degree we need to be, and we've scheduled to the degree we need to schedule, we've recruited to the degree we need to recruit, we're good. Because if you look at what makes the SEC the SEC, yeah, it's big budgets, big stadiums, et cetera. It's players. Players made all of that.
Right.
And so as long as you've got the intensity and relentlessness in talent acquisition like they do, then you'll be there at the end of the day. And Florida State does that. And Miami's absolutely doing that. And there's an entire fascinating saga around whether Clemson is choosing to do it when it comes to the portal. But the bottom line is they're at least taking it serious. And so I think there will be a lot, especially with the way it changed, and it's the first time people are getting to talk about it. There'll be a whole lot of Power 2 conversation. I think people are going to mistakenly refer to this entire new landscape we have as if there are a finite number of seats at the table, which there are, but it's not so finite that Big 12, ACC, G5 can't get in. In fact, they're mathematically guaranteed to at least have some kind of representation.
Right. And I think that's the evolving deal there is fascinating. And we've heard some, conferences are searching for multiple bids and all these different things. And what it finally shakes out to be, after this year is going to be intriguing to say the least. Let's jump into some of these ACC schools, man, because you just did your big tour, your guest speaker series, and you were able to chat with some of these. I know ACC teams were represented there, and Miami is probably the most interesting, as they always are, because there's this insurmountable hype that can be created there immediately. My question for you is, why is this year different? Why can this year be different, where it's not just in May through July, we're so excited, we're jacked up, we're talking about these guys. How can that continue to be sustainable? We look up in January and we're like, whoa, the U might be back. They might be here right now.
One of the indicators history has taught us through analytics to look at is really not that analytical at all. It's just find the places that return the head coach and both coordinators. Because it's really that simple a filter at the outset. It doesn't mean that you're completely blocked out of competing if you have new faces in some of those spots, but you got a leg up on the field if you don't. And so I go down there about a month and a half ago. Before we were going to do the speaker series, I go down there and just go watch practice. It's the first time I'd seen Cam Ward, and because I had not seen him play in a game even in person.
Right.
So I go in there, and this was one of the days that was not open to the media. So they're going at it, just full speed practice. And I was down there the year before and watched him practice with Tyler Van Dyke down there. Mm-hmm. And certainly got nothing against Van Dyke or anything like that, but I'm watching practice. So then I go and I actually went and talked to Mario in his office after practice. And he's showing some all 22 cuts, and they've got them synced up side by side, and they are essentially running a game script of plays from the previous year. And because what they want to see is, what can our guy this year do that our guy last year couldn't do? Wow. And you're looking, looking. It's so obvious. You could be completely ignorant to this sport and have never even known how to spell football, and you could watch the split screen and you could say, whoever this is on the left, if that's the guy you have now, yeah, that's the guy. Whoever that is, he looks really good. Wow. And so then you start to ask yourself, okay, well, what else does he have going around him? Well, they were as aggressive as anyone could possibly be in the transfer portal because they know they've got quarterback answers. And I don't even think it's overhyping the kid at this point to say that. I kept my mouth shut about what I saw down there until everyone else talked about it. And I said, well, okay, if we're going to talk about it, let's talk about it.
Free game now. It's free game.
But they loaded up there. They, I think they'll have one of the better offensive lines in the conference. But just overall, if you look at the overall aggregation of that freshman class elevating another year, and a lot of those guys who got their feet wet last year elevating another year, and then you combine those portal infusions, everybody gets emotional when you talk about Miami. You can never have a logical conversation about it. But if I were to peel that U, let's just peel the U off and let's just look generically at this roster. They may end up having the best quarterback situation in the conference. Yeah. They've got one of the best talent rosters in the conference. So if I were looking at that in any conference, I would say we need to take them seriously. Then you put the U back on the helmet and people scream, Mario can't win a big game. What are we talking about? Get him out of here.
Well, okay. You speaking of Mario, because I was watching your speaker series you did with him. And first of all, how was the Cuban coffee? Because that looked intense.
Oh, I've never done cocaine. All right, I've never done it. Never have. But if they liquefy that stuff, it can't be too dissimilar. And here's the bad part. The bad part is you take them in shots.
Yeah, I saw that.
Yeah. And so I take one. All right, and then they weren't filming it. So then the social media team from Miami walks out and basically, hey, can we do it again? Well, do you want me to put my finger down my throat? No. Here's another one. So
sure, guys.
I take another one.
Oh,
yeah.
No.
Then we do our interview, and I go in the weight room, and they're going to let me lift in there. And Aaron Feld comes in there with a third one. Says, just try this one. It's like a taste test at Sam's Club or Costco. And so I ended up taking 3 of those shots.
Oh,
and
no.
That was 2 weeks ago. And look at my hands.
So that was the best show you've ever had, the best workout you ever had. How was the drive home? I mean, was that okay?
Yeah, I don't remember any of it.
I blacked out.
Yeah.
Well, if Miami has all this talent, plus this, let's just call it liquid cocaine, I mean, they're going to be good to go.
Mhm.
Let's not clip that, Matt, because that could be really bad. Okay. So, but you were talking with Mario, and I do think, and Mario's been great to us. We know he can acquire talent. Like we saw the roster he put together at Oregon. I do think maybe that's the big question. I mean, and unfortunately, the Georgia Tech game kind of haunts Miami right now. What happened last year? So, what kind of feel did you get talking with Mario? Like, is this a guy? He's obviously acquired the talent. Can he take Miami to that next step where maybe we're actually talking about them being back?
So this is a good question. If you're blessed to have the perspective that we have, you get a little bit of a cheat sheet on this. But if you're a fan who doesn't get to go and have that access, and you just listen to or maybe even participate in the overarching narrative, you think the overarching narrative with Mario is great at talent acquisition. How good is he as a game day coach?
Right.
Oh man, they screwed up that Georgia Tech game, blah, blah, blah. And I find this to be the same with Napier in a different sense, but there's an overarching narrative with whether it's Florida or whether it's Miami. All right, so you would think if I were to take you along with me, that's what you're going to feel when you go inside the program. You're going to feel some trepidation. You're going to see some people who are a little unsure of themselves. And it is so radically like baseball bat to the face different when you're around these people. There's not an ounce of doubt. There is an acknowledgement that, yeah, we've screwed this up or that up, but it's like watching a major prize fight in boxing. Like a guy gets knocked across the jaw and he's done. Or watching a DB, you get burned, you got to be there 18 seconds later. That's the way that those programs function. They cannot afford to have an ounce of doubt creep in. So if you talk to Mario Cristobal, I sat there, probably talked to him for 2 hours off the record, and the Georgia Tech stuff came up, and it's not like, oh no, that didn't happen, but it's like, yeah, it happened. Okay. I mean, it is what it is. Like, it sucks. We got to move on. And then he'll lay out shot for shot for shot for shot, like a 35-point plan and reason why we'll get it done. Don't worry. We'll get it done. It's like it's almost a foregone conclusion, which it has to be in a competitor's mind, because if there is an ounce of doubt, you will be paying for a ticket to watch the game in the next 2 years instead of coaching in the game that people are paying to see.
Right. And I think, just having met him, interacted, text, whatever, so many times. I mean, that dude is obsessed with football. He's obsessed with college football. He's obsessed with Miami. And I don't say that in a negative connotation. I say that in a connotation of there's nobody better for that opportunity, for that job. And if you can take that step, my gosh, it's going to be so much fun. And that gets me excited because I haven't yet seen them in person. Talked to EJ Manuel a million times about it. He was there for the spring game, and watching that, you see the arm angles, you see the things that, that young man can do at the quarterback position. And then I think all the pieces you just said, we'll see. As the days go by, the U is like on my chest and I'm getting more excited about it. I'm trying not to, but it's hard. It's hard not to do it. Josh, let's move on to the Clemson Tigers, because you brought them up. You brought up Coach Sweeney. And I've heard you talk about them before, but how do they get back in your mind? Because there was a decade run there that I was a part of in the early stages, and then it went to heights that there's no way I thought would be attainable on a year after year basis. And now from the national perspective and media and fans, they've fallen a little bit, and they're not to that standard that they set. It's their own fault. It's what happens when you're so good for so long there. How does Clemson get back to competing for national championships in your mind?
Having the best players in the conference. It's so simple. That's what they had. I thought the Taj Boyd era teams, I thought laid the groundwork, but I thought when Deshaun Watson came along, that was their own Berlin Wall moment. That was like the breaking of the dam, because I believe this about Notre Dame right now. I believe if Notre Dame had their Deshaun Watson come along, that they could sell that to the rest of the country, and all of a sudden you get this flood of perimeter skill talent that comes in, because all of a sudden it is a concept that dominant quarterback play could happen here. Well, once Clemson showed that, the subsequent years, you look at those games they had against Bama, game against Ohio State, the wide receiver talent was insane.
Yeah.
And they had some of the best in the country. They littered the first and second round of the NFL draft with it. And so I've just looked at that position. I think their wide receiver room is kind of a microcosm of where the program is. It's not that it's some poverty program that's disappeared into the wilderness. They're still averaging, 9 or 10 wins a year over the past couple. But
Right.
it's just, you can tell when it's off a tick. And I always think about high-level college football like a NASCAR race. If you look at those cars, especially at the outset, they're all running in the same pack. And they're running like 190 miles an hour. Well, if one of them starts going 186, that's really fast. But if the rest of them are going 190, it's crazy how quickly you fall away from the lead pack. And nothing is like terminally wrong with your car. It's just like some form of airflow intake is blocked off by like a paper plate on the front of your car or something. But that's all it takes. And so with Clemson, it's just small degrees here and there. But if you're trying to run at the head of the table in this sport, you have to be, it is so crazy. This is what I admire about what Saban did at Alabama. It is so insane how maniacal you have to be in every aspect of your life and your program to actually win, period. But then to sustain it's incredible. Once you understand it, it makes perfect sense why hardly anyone ever achieves it, personally or collectively. But it's just little degrees of things. And that's why I think that transfer portal discussion is such a bigger discussion. It's not just, did we have room on the roster in this specific instance, or should we have taken this guy in that specific instance? It's a 50,000 foot thing. And it's me simply looking at what your rosters used to look like and what they look like now, which is still good, but doesn't quite match what they looked like at one point. And there's this mechanism that's available to you here, and your rivals are using it. And guys like Keon Coleman come via that mechanism. And you're looking at it and voluntarily saying, no, we're good. And so that's your prerogative. And like I said on the show last night, Dabo's got multiple proof of performance moments under his belt. It's not like we have to guess whether his way has ever worked before. So I said last night on the show, if he were sitting at this table, he'd have every right to say, I don't have to guess if my philosophy works. Here's a championship. There's a championship. It works. My only follow-up would be humbly, is the formula for winning in college football in 2015 a copy and paste to 2025? And I don't think it is. And so that doesn't mean they're about to fall off the cliff. In fact, in some cases, it's worse. If you fall off a cliff, you've got a definitive answer. What we're doing is not good enough. If it just falls off to 9-3, you can tell we're not far away. But Clemson, like you said, they set the standard. And then you're a prisoner of your own standard, because if you don't reach it, all of a sudden, like he said many times, 10 wins is all of a sudden a death sentence around here.
Josh, I don't know if you could have said that better. I have no notes. I think that was excellent. So you talk about a team that isn't really embracing the new world order. And then there's a team, max 6 hours south-ish, that really is. And that's Florida State. And yeah, I mean, Keon Coleman, when you think of, I was at the Clemson Florida State game in Death Valley. Keon Coleman made 2 plays that effectively changed the game. Now, Clemson had every chance to win it. And maybe that's not necessarily a portal thing, because they had every chance, the fumbles, whatever. But the guy that made the plays to seal it was a portal guy in Keon Coleman. So Florida State, we just watched the NFL draft. It was Florida State guy, Florida State guy, Florida State guy. They bring in DJU. Another tie to Clemson, which I feel so weird about that's happening. Do you think DJU is a good fit there? And what can we expect from Florida State this season?
I'm going to be the person who chooses to be very cautiously optimistic about him. In terms of fit, I'd call it a fit. Look, fit is a lot more a mental thing to me these days, because of how versatile and how I guess morphable a lot of modern offenses are. It's not like a puzzle piece these days. It's like a square peg, round hole. You can work your offense around a guy, and they wouldn't have taken him if they didn't think they could do that, because he's not coming there to provide depth. He's coming there to start for you for 1 year. So the fit thing, I don't have that big a question about. There is always this blind belief amongst fans that a guy's going to get 15 or 20% better than he was last year just because he returns to play another year. And I think Florida State fans are going to buy into that. And they're also going to buy into the idea that, well, our coaching staff, like Mike Norvell, chief among them, will bring out more in him than we've seen previously. Maybe that happens. I am not going to count on prolific quarterback play winning the day at Florida State. It's going to have to be probably a lot more complimentary an approach. Now, here's the trade-off. Last year, they had to do that the final couple of games. When they lost Travis, they had to do that. They had to win games defensively. And no, it wasn't against perennial national powers or anything like that, but they had to win a couple of games really ugly. Like, as JR would say, bowling shoe ugly. And they did. And so that concept, they'll probably have to employ a couple of times this year. And it's hard to repeat. It's hard to win. But I think they'll be right up there again. And, if you're a Florida State fan also, all right, even if this year feels like maybe we're down a notch compared to last year's team, it's a bridge year. That's what it should be. It should be a bridge year. And then it's like the Kelly Bryant year at Clemson. It's a bridge year. And hey, if you go to the playoff, you go to the playoff and maybe you can win it all. But it's a bridge year to hopefully what we have stockpiled for 2025 and beyond.
Right. And just, I'm a Clemson homer, so I just have to touch on that because I think it is funny because that is how it's perceived with Kelly Bryant. The bridge year that you just brought up, Clemson's number one in the country in the college football playoff. That's the bridge year. That's the standard that those guys set for themselves, which is, it's just crazy, but it's true. Everything you just said is very true, and I love that. We got to get you out of here quickly. I've got two more for you. I'm going to go NC State. I'm going to let KG go Virginia Tech. Talk about adding in the portal. NC State's going to look like a totally different team. They've amassed a lot of known commodities, specifically from the ACC that we've seen up close and personal. I think that we're going to see from this year what NC State thought last year was going to be. Are you kind of with me on that?
Yeah, I could see that. TCU's pulled that off a couple of times in the past.
Right.
So they, Grayson, I don't think most of the country even knows Grayson McCall's there.
Get ready.
I'm just a believer. There's like a preview magazine crowd that comes back in August and they say, what? And so like that crowd's going to be surprised at that. And then they'll start calling NC State a sleeper when people like us have been talking about him for 4 months. And the other thing is, if you go look at any of the odds at the major books out there, I always love lining those conference odds up because I want to see, according to books, who has the most workable schedule. NC State misses 4 of the top 5 odds teams in the ACC this year. So you've got quarterback that is like 29 years old, more than experienced and proven. You've got a schedule that's as workable as it's going to get. They get to play Tennessee early, which is not a conference game. So it's a great test for them. Yeah, I could easily see him sneaking around.
I think so. And we know Doran has his culture established there. They lose some pieces defensively, but I think they should be able to kind of replenish. Okay, Josh, I know you love passionate fan bases. They probably get after you all the time on your show. Virginia Tech is one of those. Now, they have not had a lot to talk about lately, so they haven't really had any right to be mad at anybody. But they love their team, and they've shown up. They were packing that place out when they were 3-8. And there's a lot of hype with Virginia Tech as well, bringing back what they do with Kyron Drones and how they turned it around last year. Are you buying into at least some of this Virginia Tech hype?
Yeah, I am. I think their biggest struggle right now has been they have to reestablish what it means to recruit in the state of Virginia.
Yes.
When I was up there a month and a half ago, I was talking to Brent, and he said, he obviously bleeds Virginia Tech. He knows that place. He said, when I was at Penn State, candidly, we knew if we wanted a kid from Virginia, we were going to get him. And if we didn't, it was going to be because Ohio State came in and got it. It wasn't going to be because Virginia Tech put up much of a fight.
Wow.
And he said, that hurt me. I was at another place, and it hurt me because for whatever reason, the previous staff they didn't emphasize it. He said, so we've had to do that. And we also, we have a replenishing job to do. And that's why I think they walk a fine line up there of they want the promotional hype and what that does for ticket sales and whatnot. But at Virginia Tech, like you said, Kelly, you don't really need it. Even last year, when they didn't have anything to write home about on the field, they're packing that place, which is amazing. Those are the fan bases I want to see get rewarded. Yeah. So I think across the board, they are better depth-wise. They are not going to be competitive roster-wise with a Miami or a Florida State or Clemson this year. Doesn't mean they couldn't pull upsets, but they don't match man for man. But they are at least headed in the right direction. I feel very confident in saying that.
Yeah, I can't wait to see it, man. This was a real treat, brother. I know you got to go. We appreciate your time. Cannot wait to see how this season rolls out because I think there's about 5 teams that got a shot in this league, which has been very different than what we're used to. So appreciate your time, and always great seeing you.
Absolutely. I appreciate you having me.
Thanks again to Josh Pate for joining us and for putting the perfect bow on our summer guest series. Before we get out of here, though, Mac reminded me that he threw down on the grill last weekend, which of course he did. You know, that's what he does. But you made like 6 racks of ribs. Walk us through this.
Well, and you pointed out that it's art, you know, the things that I'm doing
Mac
on
is an
here.
artist.
So yeah, I try, you know, so we're about to crank things up. As you guys know, football season is here. ACC Media Day coming up, which we're going to take a week off. You guys go tune into that. I'll be in Charlotte busting it. KG's going to be on the beach. We'll touch on that in a second.
Network.
Watch ACC
Mac
Network. We'll be all over there. We'll be working all day long. But so this is kind of my last hurrah, you know, if you will. So hit up my cousin, hit up my parents, aunt and uncles, and said, hey, let's do a big cookout. Let's just hang out, be at the pool, whatever. And so we were kind of thinking of what to do. And again, the Traeger is at my house. The meat is at Ingles. And we had to somehow get all of that to Sumter, South Carolina. And we did. We made it happen. You go buy what you need to do, pack up the grill and my dad's truck and trailer. And we get it down there and unload and have this massive party. And so, you know, when you have that much meat, KG, you don't want to just do the same thing. I mean, you want a little variety. You want to mix it up. You want to give people options. Now, it's all meat. It's all ribs, but we're going to give you options. And so we did 3 things of a sweet heat kind of deal where it's nice, it's good, it has a lot of good flavor. Then we did some with a little bit of twang, if you guys know what I'm talking about there. A little hearty, a little more hearty. And then I did one spicy, which was really good. And so you try to mix it up. I have different sauces that I put on there as well. But it was so much fun. Go check out my Instagram. It's all over there. You guys will see that and see the different things we did. But that, to me, KG, is just, it's a perfect Saturday. You start at 11 a.m., you eat at 7 p.m., and all throughout, you're just smoking meat that entire time.
Yep.
It's great. It's so good.
Mac, you know, when you say, you were like, yeah, you know, you're smoking meat, everyone does not make 6 racks of ribs. That
6.
is a little unique for the McLean family, but you know, you guys do you do you.
You know.
And for me on the other side, I'm going to the beach next week. Very excited.
Yes.
So you know, the beach sandwich content is coming for you because I may not know how to do 6 racks of ribs, but I can make a hell of a beach sandwich. So just stay tuned for that.
You can. And I will just say this. There is nothing better than being on the beach. It's hot and you just reach into that cooler and you get that nice, beautiful sandwich, maybe with a thick tomato, a fresh tomato right there.
Yes, Matt.
Can't wait.
Yes.
I'm excited for you. I'm excited
It's
for you.
different. Thank you.
That's right.
you.
That's right.
Can't wait.
What else is about to hit different, KG? We're jumping into these previews. Every single team, all 17 head coaches, we're previewing them all. Check it out. First one, North Carolina, Monday, July 29th. I cannot wait. It's going to be so much fun. So you guys just stay tuned. We've got a graphic coming out. We're going to tell you everybody that's coming on, when they're coming on, and it's going to be a lot of fun. These were fantastic. Really appreciate the times and appreciate all our guests from this summer. It was a really cool summer, a bunch of different stories, a bunch of cool people. Always appreciate y'all tuning in. So go over to YouTube, subscribe. You're not going to want to miss any of these previews. Jump in the comments section on all these teams too. We'd love to hear your thoughts on them. And of course, the OGs over on Apple Podcasts as well. Rate, review, subscribe there. We would greatly appreciate that. But until next time, we'll see y'all.